However, when we say, oh, it's social contagion, and then we start spreading it around as if a theory is something that has grounds in science. It doesn't mean theory as in like, oh, it's just an idea that I have. A theory means that it has sources, it has something behind it, not just like a vibe check.
If that's your criteria, then I would just say that, literally everything the left says about institutional racism is a conspiracy, and everything about white supremacy is a conspiracy. So if the criteria is
Why?
going to be set that
There's
high.
studies about specifically systemic racism.
Well,
Also,
that's a
you don't
great
even
point.
believe
That's
in
a
that.
great
None
So.
of them
point,
have
Sitch.
none of them have borne out anything other than the fact that disparities exist.
Okay.
I'm horribly unequipped for this discussion.
Do you think that
Something
you could be wrong?
you are both being very serious about how you are kind of conspiratorial and promoting like transphobic narratives around trans people while also making jokes.
How is it?
So-
How is social
so-
contagion
so-
transphobic, though?
So
It's
okay.
conspiratorial.
Well,
and
no,
it
but
is
this is the problem, Katie. I don't think you don't understand the basis of our argument or my argument. So you're assuming your position here, because the basis for my argument is that if you look at the facts, if you look at the data, 60 to 90% of children before affirmative care model was put in place desisted when they were diagnosed with gender dysphoria, meaning that once they went through puberty, they no longer felt they had gender dysphoria.
I'm not saying that you object to people transitioning.
Let me finish. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's a
don't
waste
straw
of
man.
time, but go
Don't
ahead.
straw man,
Well,
Katie.
you were making an accusation against me. So
You don't even get what my accusation is, but go ahead.
So once the affirmative care model was put into place, that all changed. And the number of desistants once kids were given puberty blockers and given cross-sex hormones went from 60 to 90% to 30 to 2%. Okay. Which to me shows me that obviously there's something going on here that requires more study. And I think you combine that with the massive increase in the rates of people identifying as transgender, especially among young girls, which is vastly disproportionate to the amount that they were coming out as trans before recently. And to me, that leads me to believe more in a social contagion theory for these events that are happening. And I don't think that's transphobic.
Yeah, I'm sure that you don't.
Well, how is it? Explain to us how it is transphobic.
Well, it's conspiratorial.
Well, no, it's not a conspiracy. It's just it happens.
Yeah, I don't think it's intentional.
What
There's
happens?
There's social contagions around anorexia. Is that a conspiracy?
What do you think social contagion in regarding to transphobia, like trans people, is?
Well,
that
this
people are
is why
catching being trans?
this is why I
No.
asked you what your opinion of social contagion was. I mean, we never really dug into it, but do you understand social contagion?
I don't think I do.
Well, social contagion often is, people empathize with other people that they find high status or that they find respectable or endearing, and they copy those people. Like there's actually a report that they put out for people who work in the media about how to handle when celebrities kill themselves, because they found that when celebrities kill themselves, there can be a social
There's
contagion.
an uprising.
Yeah,
and
there's a
people
social
killing
contagion of
themselves,
people
yes.
killing themselves. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
if that happens with suicide, why couldn't that be also happening with transgenderism? There's also plenty of literature on social contagion around anorexia. Like one girl will get anorexia and all her friends will want to empathize with her, and they all end up with anorexia too. So
That's quite simplistic, but okay. Yeah, they kind of like, I guess that's an interesting way of phrasing it. What are like
Well, this is why I brought it up in the context of Nick Fuentes too, because I mean that's basically what you're saying. You're saying, look, people look up to Destiny. Destiny's very influential. If Destiny does something, even if he says, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," other people will do it, right?
You realize that if that's your threshold for social contagion, everything humans do is that. Like, we're constantly influenced by each other all the time. If social contagion just means humans are affected by other humans that they like, then it's like a meaningless statement.
Well, I think
Like,
status. I think high status is an important component that would. I mean,
okay.
obviously, if your best friend is into something, you're more likely to be into it too. So, I mean, their status is relative to you. But if someone is high status, I mean, this is why they have the ideas around. I guess is it regulation? Why they have the certain prohibitions about talking about suicide when celebrities kill themselves in the media is because they don't want a bunch of people to kill themselves. But we don't have any of those kind of prohibitions around these celebrity transgender people. But I could easily see if celebrity transgender people are making young people think that they have gender dysphoria when they don't. That could be a problem.
How could you make one think they have gender dysphoria?
Well, they could, like a lot of people say that a lot of the people with gender dysphoria have autism. So they become fixated on gender. Look, so you don't buy that. It sounds like looks like you're laughing about it. So
Yes. I said
why don't you?
conspiratorial for a reason.
Well, why don't you buy it though?
Why don't I buy it though? Because I think that gender dysphoria, if we're strictly talking about gender dysphoria, is a psychiatric condition that has like diagnostic criteria. And I trust medical professionals who are more educated and more capable of me and that have researched this field a lot longer to be able to make better diagnostic decisions than a layperson like myself does. So that, and combined with the fact that social contagion, by your definition, is like when you like someone, you try to imitate their behavior. But the fact that gender is not something like a clothes that you pick, like gender experience is quite unique. And if you talk to trans people, they'll talk about having very early experiences with their gender and like their gender dysphoria or like the mismatch with their gender. Plus the fact that bringing up that it's mostly basically the trope is like vulnerable autistic young girls who are confused. It's setting up a certain narrative to delegitimize trans people and their transitioning.
I would agree with you if the narrative is untrue, but the question is whether or not it's untrue. Philosophy Tube came out recently and said that a lot of transgender people are basically saying whatever they need to say to these people who are supposed to be evaluating them to get the evaluation that they want. So when you're putting your faith in these professionals, how do you deal with the fact that, some big YouTube influencer has basically told them what to say? So they're going to go to those people, say what they need to say, and those people are going to tell them that they have gender dysphoria.
Well, I think Philosophy Tube was really shitty with their video, actually.
Okay.
I think delegitimizing gender dysphoria is pretty unhelpful to trans people.
But you, as a clinician, how do you tell the difference between someone who's listened to Philosophy Tube and is just telling you what Philosophy Tube told?
I'm not a clinician.
But I understand that. But just imagine that you are a clinician, okay? Someone has come to you and they're describing their experience of gender dysphoria. How do you tell the difference between someone describing what Philosophy Tube has told them to describe and someone who has had those actual experiences?
Okay, so there are two parts to that answer. One is I am not a clinician, neither are you. If you don't trust clinicians to be able to do their jobs, then that's like a whole different conversation.
Right.
It seems that there's a mistrust I don't know if that mistrust exists for you in everything. I suspect it doesn't, just in this specific case, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, pretty much everything. Yeah.
Okay, maybe you're a libertarian then.
Dentists really, I mean, don't trust a dentist, whatever you do, Katie. They're fucking monsters. So,
Okay, thank you. So yeah, if you have a distrust in the institutions and the education and like the professionals who are doing the diagnosis, obviously you're going to lean into whatever makes sense in your head. I just find it to be like incredibly anti-intellectual and like non-factual.
well, no,
But you can go with your feelings.
so,
But like,
are you
Mhm.
assuming, are you saying that the clinician will have a way to weed out the people who are just telling them exactly what philosophy tube said to tell? And there's some method to this that you don't necessarily understand. Is that the argument that you're making?
No, I'm saying that I trust mental professionals to do their jobs.
Right. But
And hopefully, if someone faked their symptoms, they'll be caught up along the way.
right.
Right?
Okay. I got
That
you.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyone can try to fake anything. That was the second part of my answer that I wanted to ask you. It's kind of like you can go online and read what the symptoms of depression are, and then you can go to a psychiatrist and pretend to have depression.
Right.
So you would either need to make this argument for literally any type of anyone who's diagnosed with anything, or this is just about vulnerable autistic trans girls who are also really good at faking symptoms to mental health professionals that it is their job to figure it out.
Well, I don't
but
know that I have a lot of faith in the mental health professionals. So,
Yeah, so that's what I mean with conspiratorialism. Like, if you don't believe in the institutions that we entrust in to make these types of like medical decisions for the sake of like children, then I don't know how to calm your fear, right? If you say I don't trust medical professionals, I don't have a way to say no, you should. Like, I just have more belief in like the
it's not
field of medicine.
it's,
I don't know.
first of all, you keep saying it's conspiratorial. There's no conspiracy of people to undermine these institutions. Okay. I think these are just situations that happen. I think people, they see an influencer that's very popular. They're like, I want to be like this person. Maybe I am like this person. Maybe I have the same sort of affliction as this person. And they just start internalizing that identity, which
And they just
I think
happen
can
to be
happen.
autistic. So it happens to work out really
Well,
well because autistic people are dumb.
Well, no, autistic people fixate on certain things. That's one of the symptoms of autism, right? So if you
Don't you
fixate on
think that a lot of
gender
stars
identity,
need to align for this? Like, there needs to be a lot of autistic girls. They all need to fixate on the concept of gender and admire some figure that they want to be like her. And you're like, this is not conspiratorial. It's just like all these things are definitely happening.
Well, I
Here
mean, you
is the
keep saying
data that doesn't exist.
what
Well,
is your
not really. If the numbers are so low, here's the problem. So before the affirmation model came into being, it was something like the prevalency rate for girls that have gender dysphoria was 0.02%. And the prevalency rate for boys was like 0.0125, so significantly higher. So it was like, I don't know, something like 5-to-1 boys or 6-to-1 boys to girls for gender dysphoria. Now, girls are even with boys. That's a massive increase in prevalency rate for girls. That has been completely unexplained by everyone. And that's why a lot of European countries are now afraid of doing the affirmative care model now. So I don't think it's a conspiracy to think that there's something unusual happening here, regardless of what the reason for it is.
Do you know that a lot of girls and women are being diagnosed with autism in recent years?
Yeah, because they fucked up the criteria for women. Yeah.
So there's now a huge increase in the numbers of how many women are autistic, even though for decades we had a certain threshold between men and women. And now suddenly there are a lot more autistic women proportionally than we thought.
Right.
Correct? So you know that.
That doesn't help your argument though, at all. Because the reason
Can
that those
I finish
numbers are
my argument?
Okay.
Cool. So if we understand that that can happen, and we also have 50 IQ Lance's little like right-handed chart, we understand that these increases can happen. There are many social reasons why girls might have had a harder time coming out. Also, I'm not going to deny that it's possible that some people get dragged into sometimes. I just don't see it as like a valid argument to like not let mental professionals handle this.
Sure. So, okay, regarding the autism thing, that's not really applicable here because in that case, the criteria for autism was changed, and the change in the criteria is what allowed or what made them realize that there were
That's
actually a
not
lot of
true.
girls. Yeah, what do you mean? They said that we had a wrong criteria. This criteria was developed for boys, and when they started to change it because they realized it was manifesting differently in girls, the rates increased in girls.
Okay, that's what you mean by change. Okay, you see it as changed. I see it as obviously like they just didn't research it in women. So
Well, I mean,
there's
okay, right, fine,
yeah.
whatever, sure,
Okay.
that is true. They didn't research in women, partially because there was a blank slate theory of gender and sex, which has
Right.
been very pernicious and finally is going away.
They assumed if
So-
it happened in the men one way, it would be the same in the women.
Right, we've been
Yeah.
seeing this with a lot of medical studies, which is now going away.
Yeah, it's kind of like how when they invented the seat belt, they invented it on men, and a lot of women ended up dying because it wasn't made for like male bodies.
right.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't really apply to this because the gender dysphoria criteria isn't changed recently. So that wouldn't
But
explain the
societal
increase.
factors changed.
Okay. So we can talk about societal factors, but I'm saying the criteria hasn't changed at all. So in terms of societal factors, it would be unusual if the societal factors changed to only have one sex drastically increase in prevalency, but the other sex remain exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the solution is basically that a very big increase happened because girls are having a fad.
Well, no, to me, the solution would be to actually have you couldn't do a double blind study, but to have a study where you have people that are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and you say, okay, we're going to give one of these groups puberty blockers, and one of these groups we're not going to give puberty blockers, and we're going to see what the desistance rates are, and to see if there's a massive desistance rate in people that go through puberty, and there's not any desistance rate, or there's a very low desistance rate in people getting puberty blockers. That should tell you that the puberty blockers are actually changing the outcome. That would be my solution.
So
But-
you want to do a study to figure out why it is.
Yes, because if they did that study and it turned out, nope, we've done the study, the desistance rate is still very low for whatever reason nowadays in all populations, even if we don't give them puberty blockers, I'd say, oh, okay, well then something else is going on here, and can keep going. Maybe affirmative care model is the way to go.
Okay. I am not educated enough to tell you what study needs to be made and in what criteria, but I will tell you this. I absolutely support researching this. However, when we say, oh, it's social contagion, and then we start spreading it around as a theory is something that has grounds in science. It doesn't mean theory as in like, oh, it's just an idea that I have. A theory means that it has sources, it has something behind it, not just like a vibe check. So if you want to do whatever study you want to do, and then you have more legitimacy to the little conspiratorial like social contagion thing, then you can do that. Until then, it's conspiratorial.
There's plenty of research on social contagion and suicide, though. Like, it goes back 50 years.
That's great.
Okay.
How is that
if,
related to transgender?
if that's your criteria, then I would just say that, literally everything the left says about institutional racism is a conspiracy, and everything about white supremacy is a conspiracy. So if the criteria is
Why?
going to be set that
There's
high.
studies about specifically systemic racism. Also,
That's a
you don't
great
even
point.
believe
That's
in
a
that.
great
None of
point,
them have
Sitch.
none of them have borne out anything other than the fact that disparities exist.
I'm
So-
very confused. Studies are not meant to tell you what the conclusion. Can you walk me through this?
Walk you through what?
What you just said. I don't understand what the great point is.
I said,
You said-
if your criteria is that we can't even bring up the fact of social contagion because there hasn't been a specific study equating that to trans stuff, and it hasn't been borne out exactly in science because of how you're talking about a theory. What I'm saying is under that criteria, the entire concept of institutional racism, white supremacy that we constantly hear about on the left, that's all a conspiracy theory too. It's all a completely unsourced conspiracy theory that's based on bullshit.
Even though there's
Less bullshit than
research
the
on
trans
it?
stuff. There's no research on the white
No,
supremacy stuff.
there's research that says, hey, look, there's differences in incarceration rates. That's all the research says, right? To equate that to we live in a white supremacist society or any of this other stuff, that's
Wait,
all of the conspiracy theory.
you can never get we live in a white supremacist society from a scientific study. That's not a study would never you can never give you this result.
Sure can. What do you mean?
This is very bad faith.
You could wait a minute. You could you could make a statement about I'm defining white supremacy as this, and I
Yes,
can do a
you'd have
study
to
to see
define
if
it,
this
yes.
right. You define it, and then you'd say, okay, now I can do a study to see if whatever this thing is manifesting itself in society. I mean,
Yes.
if you can't measure white supremacy, if it's this amorphous thing, then the whole concept is useless.
Yeah. If white supremacy is the adverse consequences for Black people comparative to white people, then there has been
Well, if we're
plenty
just
of
going to
research
give
on
it that vague of a category,
I mean, we can work with broader categories, and I'm fine with going over the research on this. I could try to look up some sources. Maybe I'm not as sourced as I think I am. So I'll own up to that, although I'm pretty sure I'll be fine. What I am trying to think, though, is if I can make my criteria. I think you misunderstand, like, what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you have to have a study that, like, proves social contagion. I just need you to have a study that in any way, like, correlates this thing. Like, suicide and suicidality has a lot of factors that go into it. That are unrelated to anything that has to do with trans issue. Like gender identity is a bit it's kind of interesting to think about actually in terms of like the stability of something like gender identity versus like something like depression that would lead to suicidality, but suicidality induced by other people encountering someone that they like being suicidal. Like I assume those people were already in a bad state. There's a lot of like research that I'd have to go into on it. I don't know. Did you read any of that? Like, what do you see?
I don't understand exactly what you're asking.
Yeah. So like there's a lot of research about social contagion and suicidality. And it says what?
It says that people that are, or I mean, it's not, no one's going to be healthy, right? In a healthy state of mind. And then they're going to see someone commit suicide and then they're commit suicide. It's people that are in vulnerable states for whatever reason will see someone do that. And it kind of puts the idea in their head of like, oh yeah, this is a thing I can do. Especially if it's someone who's famous. Right.
Yeah.
And so how this would equate to transgender stuff would be more that there are people who are, especially young people who are going through puberty who might, or even before puberty, might feel like depressed or might feel sad or might feel like something is wrong. And then they see people transition and they say, talk about it and talk about how much better they felt. And they could, I think they could easily confuse their own situation with thinking that they have gender dysphoria when they actually don't.
Okay. Have you talked to any trans people about this?
Yeah.
And they told you that they had similar experiences?
Well, the trans people we've talked to, we never talked to someone with trans regret. So the trans people we've talked to have all been pretty affirmative in that they had gender dysphoria.
But there have been detransitioners that have said,
of course,
this was the situation with them. Yeah.
And again, the desistance rate shows that something unusual is happening. So
the displacement rates. So you're saying that puberty blockers are causing people who aren't
not to desist.
Really not to desist.
Right. Now we don't know whether that means that either those people were quote technically wrongly diagnosed because they don't actually have gender dysphoria in terms of I think gender dysphoria is something people are born with, or B, maybe people aren't strictly born with gender dysphoria, they're just born with a potential to have gender dysphoria, and maybe puberty can knock it, one way or the other. But we don't have enough research to know which one of those is accurate.
Yeah, I wish I could remember anything from the discussion I had the other night about this when we were talking about the exact opposite, about how like there's a lot of deceasement before puberty blockers and after that. So it's actually a positive sign that the people who get to the puberty blockers are actually being properly diagnosed, because then deceasement stops.
Well, there could be desistant before. I haven't the stuff I've seen is desistance after puberty blockers is significantly lower than it's ever been. So I'm
Yeah,
not sure
but
what they're
like
referring to.
in the Lance Tim discussion, they brought up that what, like 93% of people who do affirmative care before puberty blockers decease. So
No, so
that's a
Tim,
lot.
so there
Was
was a
it
fuck up.
90 or 70?
So there was
I
a
don't
fuck up in
remember.
the conversation. Tim brought up what I said about the 60 to 90% desistance rate. And then Lance, as a counter, brought up the literature review / meta study, which led in that whole sidetrack. But the studies that Lance brought up had nothing to do with desistance. They were all about transregret, which is a completely different topic.
I know, but we are talking about desistment. And we
Right.
both have Google, so we can just Google how much is the desistment rate before puberty blockers, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's like
I said it
68
was like something like
to
20 to 2%, depending on where you look at it. Okay. When you say before puberty when I say before puberty blockers, I meant before the time period in our history where we gave kids puberty
No,
blockers.
that's not what I mean.
Right. You mean
Obviously not.
literally before kids are given puberty blockers.
Yes.
Yeah. When I say that the studies show that there's like a 20 to 2% desistance rate, that includes, I think that includes the entire age. Doesn't mean like just, once kids get on puberty blockers.
No,
you mean
there's
you're saying it backwards. You don't mean 20% to 2% desistance rate. You mean 20% to 2%.
No. When the old studies
98% desist though.
before we gave kids puberty blockers, the
Right.
desistance rate was
98%.
60 to 90%.
Right.
Now that doesn't, the majority of the desistance rate was in the 11 to 13-year-old range.
But you keep saying like 2 to 2%.
Wait.
When
Listen, let me finish. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
Okay. In the before affirmative care model, it was 60 to 90%. And that includes a bunch of different studies. That's why the range is so high, because this includes a bunch of different studies. Now, the majority of that was in the 11 to 13 range, but that 13-year range. But that 60 to 90% number includes everyone, or everyone before the age of 18. Right? That's just the majority was 11 to 13. And it's the same thing with the numbers now, the range of like the 20 to 2% range. It's the same thing. It's including all ages. So they're not just saying like, oh, 20 to 2% applies only to like, 11 to 13-year-olds.
Okay.
I'm horribly unequipped for this discussion. The discussing of like this type of trans discourse is something that I've actively stayed away from. So honestly, I made a very big mistake, like in terms of my advocacy. It was like irresponsible of me to actually engage in this, because I potentially did a very
We
bad
like
job.
irresponsible people, so I mean that's good as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
but I'm disappointing
you.
myself, so
Good of
it's
you
not
to
about
admit it.
you.
Well, no, look, I don't think anything you're doing is irresponsible, and I don't think that you should
Well, I
apologize
disagree,
for it.
but this is why I don't
disagree
like.
as well.
Well, we disagree for different reasons, because I know what you're saying, but this is why I don't like when it's like, oh, you guys are transphobic, when you could just ask, well, what is the basis of your opinion, as opposed to making the accusation. Because then we would have just said all this stuff, and you said, well, I don't know about any of this, and then the conversation can move forward.
But the fact
Well,
that she's
the
saying
thing
that is responsible, though, Sitch. I mean, it's something.
Well, no,
Lance
because she
would never
doesn't. She
say.
means she's being irresponsible, because she thinks if she can't push back against us and we're saying something that is wrong, that's her being irresponsible. She means it in a completely different way.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's also because if you are wrong or misrepresenting, it's not about like, I need to push back against you because I already think you're transphobic. Is like, I don't know you. So like, you could tell me anything and I could be okay with it. And that, for example, in the abortion debate, a bunch of people DM me about like how to dispel the whole nonsense about the consciousness thing that you were talking about.
Okay.
It's like I got like paragraphs and paragraphs of like stuff I was supposed to like
Hilarious.
regurgitate and
That's
shit.
awesome.
Right?
Do you regularly have like all these people like DMing you?
No,
They're
but
like,
Okay.
I
they're like,
got
Katie, destroy them. The consciousness is bullshit.
no. I am not very good with fact and research type argumentation. I
Mhm.
find it incredibly boring. I think there's an incredible amount of hubris in the internet space to think that any layperson who has no education can just like read a bunch of papers and now they know better than like professionals.
Yeah,
I
true.
personally resent that very much, so I stay the fuck away from that.
Yeah.
I more care about like discussing morals and ethics and philosophy. I do not have the education nor the ability to analyze half the things that we are even discussing. So I don't like to participate in this system where people jerk each other off pretending like they're capable of analyzing the information that they're regurgitating to their audience. Which is why I'm ill-equipped to handle this type of discussion. So like that is
Do you think that
something.
you could be wrong? Do you think
Do I
there's a
think I could be
possibility
wrong?
that you could be wrong about the social contagion stuff?
Well, no, about it. Well, I would even say about anything, because if you're not basing your position, your morals, and your philosophy based on facts
Can I
and
answer?
evidence, then I don't understand what you're. Well,
Can
because
I
you're saying that
answer?
we're jerking ourselves off by like caring about information.
Can I answer?
No, please do answer. Yeah.
Okay. I think I could be wrong about the social contagion, obviously, because I don't know the information required to say otherwise. The way that I base my opinions on things is rarely, I don't like to be dependent. So I do this exercise where I'm like, well, let's say that this fact that I don't think is true is true. What would be my position then? For example, I did it with like race realism. I'm like, let's say there were differences between the races. What would my prescriptions be then? If this horrible fact that I don't want to be true was true, then what? And based on then what is how I base my prescriptions on, because I take into account that it's possible that the science is wrong. It's just a lot of the time it's very convenient to me that science aligns to my side, but I work off the position that no matter where science lands, I'm good with my answer either way, because I understand we might discover new things. So I want to make sure that the things that I'm saying are stuff that I'm comfortable with either way. So yeah, like it could be that social contagion is like, let's say theoretically that was true. I think any prescriptions that we would have to do about that wouldn't conflate with any advocacy that I currently do. So it doesn't really matter to me.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.